Good afternoon. It is Thursday, the 15th of July, on what has turned out to be a warm, sunny afternoon. And I'm back in the Read Nook with a nice hot cup of tea and a big parcel of books. No, they're all books because this is stuff I've ordered. I've ordered it from drivethroughrpg.com and I took advantage of the recent sale of basically premium books to fill in some spaces in my library. So let's get into this. So it's quite a heavy box. There we go. Pull out one thick wodge of padding before we get to the first book. So let's move this box out of the way, and what I'm going to show you is this Warpstar. I'll get to Warpstar in a second. Welcome to Warpstar. Warpstar, and it's Warpstar with an exclamation mark. Warpstar. It's a rules-light science fiction role-playing game set within a chorus of a million worlds that aims to emulate the feeling of old-school British tabletop games, adventures and action in the depths of space. Warpstar looks to reproduce the themes and feelings of its illustrious predecessors, but in a light, quick and simple manner, with a consistent rules that is easily hackable and adaptable as it desires. And it's from Fire Ruby Designs, and this is the science fiction equivalent to Warpstone. Now, Warpstone essentially is can be best described as a Warhammer Fantasy retro clone, but almost a basic version. Essentially, more inspired than derived, since its mechanics are different. They're simpler, but the feel of the game is very much one of grim and perilous adventure, and many of the occupations that the characters can take are very similar, but it's combined with, again, with a really very simple system of roll a d20, add the appropriate skill. If you get over 20, you succeed, whereas Warhammer and its descendants, right down to Zweihander, are mostly percentile based. But Warpstar is the science fiction version. So what that is drawing upon really is the setting of Warhammer 40,000, Warhammer 40k, which, to be fair, never got a role-playing game of its own until the early noughties with year 2001, something like that, with Dark Heresy, and those games which were initially published by Games Workshop and then subsequently picked up by Fantasy Flight Games. So so this is really drawing from the sort of like the background of the miniatures world setting as such, more than if you go back to the 80s when it first came out, which is where this is kind of inspired by, and then again sort of by the eventual role-playing versions that came out. I know there's a bit of a mix, but anyway, here we go. So this is a much more there's much more to this than in the core Warpstone book. Essentially it's got a quick description of what role-playing is, what the book is, as you would expect for a role-playing game. And it's telling you essentially what the players do, how do you actually play, what the golden rules is that this game, and it gives some of the setting and how it all works. And essentially you've got setting is a hegemony, a military organisation that answers the autarch, which polices and controls the worlds with their fearful Nova God power armoured troops. Not Space Marines at all, no. And we've got the Merchant Combine, the Warpstar Consortium, which are the guilds that control the highest technologies, feudal houses, cadence, technological drug controlled and distributed by the Autarch that slows aging and makes regular users immortal. So you've also got there elements of Dune as well. You have basically core character system. Basically, you have a stamina and luck, and then you have talents which are randomly generated. So it might be ambidextrous or consummate professional, which allows you to basically add 2 to your career skill ratings. Dark sight, either due to implants or innate ability. You can see moonlight as well as day. Deadly aim, born haggler, and so on. Yeah, you've got multiple tables of talents before we get into. So that's already table 2. So the layout is clean, tidy. It's really easy to read. And then we go on to careers and skills. Quite a list of skills from animal handler, appraise, astronav, all the way down to throne, warp focus, and 0G. Basic careers are you've got things like agitator, bodyguard, gambler, ganger, investigator, street kid, rebel, scientist, scout, and warp touched. So there is essentially roll. What you do is you roll 4d6, and that gives you 4 options to choose from, and that's your first career. Simple as that. And then each one has got its own page. So there's the agitator. Okay, so quite dark, grubby illustration. And then on here we have the basic skills, so blunt 10, intimidate 10, dodge 12, persuasion 12, streetwise 12, and that's your beginning stats. That's essentially in your skills, and then you roll for who you've worked for and who's hunting you, and that's it. And it's different for each time. Essentially the skills are different, but you've got a different table. So if we go to investigator, the table is what's your most important difficult case, who keeps you on the right track, and so on. And it's right through to all these careers. So there are, you've got 24 different careers there, right down to warp touched. And then you get 3 traits, which you pick or choose. Basically pick or, come up with your own. And then the start of play, the player characters will have own 1 ship between them. Roll the table below to see what ship design they have. So it might be a Duabney Envoy Cruiser, D-Class Charger, Kilos Star Hauler, Filoni Hawk Moth, and so on. There we go. And the details of those ships are presented later on. And the core rules are really simple. Roll D20, add the skill, get over 20, equal to or over 20, success, and that's it really. It's a bit more than that. Essentially, if you want to sort of bonus rolls and opposed rolls and so on, and testing luck and that kind of thing, but it's very simple. This is a game all about tone as much as anything. And then we go on to their advanced. If you basically from one of the things that this doesn't do, which Warhammer and basically Warhammer 40k did, or Dark Heresy essentially, is there were career exits. So if you completed one career, there were various options where you go to, I want to do that for my next career. This doesn't, but it does do advanced careers. So agent, captor, cult leader, doctor, duelists, basically, and these aren't, they're not 1 per page. There's not as much information here, but essentially it is a case of you just are given the new stat bonuses, and that's really it. There's no table for background, because essentially stepping into the advanced careers is much more of something that you've done as a player character, rather than something you did in your combat includes rules. You've got flanking, attack, pinning, melee attacks, ranged attacks, and so on. So really quite simple rules, really kind of straightforward. Effects of damage and recovering. It's how armor works, and it's really, again, it's really kind of stripped down. And because this is because of the inspiration, you have critical hit tables, so slashing and piercing and crushing, all adding to the effect of your weapons, so critical energy there before we get onto spacecraft. So that's dealing with everything. You've got everything else you would expect. So interacting with the mind of the spaceship, crew positions, ship capabilities are all there, discussed there. They're going to be used. I mean, it's fantastic. The tone of this is fantastically straightforward. I like that very much. It knows what it wants to be. It gets on and does it. Doesn't mess about. Going to warp travel and scanners and everything you want to know about your ship, how are the basics, and then we get on to the player character ships like the ordinary envoy cruisers. You've got the description there, and then over the page the stats. There's no illustration. That's a little bit disappointing. I would have liked to have seen these illustrated now. It would have been fun if these... Oh, there's something here, but I think that's possibly a Stessel Nightwing. I'm going to take a guess at that because it's got wings. But with all of these things, it's sort of like you kind of want them also to have deck plans as well. I always like a good set of deck plans because essentially that's where the characters are going to be spending a lot of their time. Again, we have other vehicles as well, such as a zero grav skiff and an illustration of another vehicle there. And we go on to vehicle criticals, but essentially but basically that's nice and simple again. And essentially when you get into it also, the space travel is done by the warp, as you would expect for a role-playing game inspired by Warhammer 40k. So you have a discussion of warp glyphs and the dangers of travelling in the warp manifesting glyphs, and essentially the characters themselves essentially glyph you can use can harness the effects of the warp in combat, through the glyphs in combat, leading to warp bleed and warp mutations. And if you heard that screaming child, I hope it got a warp mutation just then. I don't understand why it was screaming then. Maybe it should come over and roll on a lesser mutation table. I'm not going to inflict a greater mutation on them yet. But there is a table for that. And essentially we have a whole big list of glyphs before we get onto the nature of the galaxy there in those pages. Here is again dealing with technologies such as robots and weapons, on communication, computing, vehicles and spacecraft and so on, and the warp itself. And then we're into the worlds of the chorus. So that's really only just, I mean, that's only, I'm going to say basically that's what, 2 pages on that. Then we're into Denizens, and there's a million worlds and Denizens and careers, and they can handle them in combat, their abilities and so on. So basically, if you ever want an elephant with a minigun, it's all here. Typical Nova Guard. Not quite Space Marine, but getting there. And Chronox, essentially, basically a menace across the known parts of the chorus. Whatever that could be. Not an alien, of course, not a xenomorph. And then Scritters are basically vermin with reptilian tails. All the way down to warp ticks and warp entities, and finally we've got some rules stuff for the GM, essentially discussing, essentially just going over the setting of Warpstar, what the player characters do, what the game master do. It's all there, really clean and tidy, and just discussing some of the themes and ideas behind the game and scenarios. And again, there's the character sheet, so you just get an idea just how simple that this is. So that's Warpstar from Fire Ruby Games. I will review this in due course. I really like Warpstone, the fantasy version. I've reviewed the core rules and also the companion. Hopefully review some more at some point. If you want a copy of this, it's available on drivethrurpg.com. So if you really want a simplified British role-playing game, sort of dark, gritty science fiction with essentially a Baroque kind of sensibility to it, then Warpstar is possibly a good choice. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching another unboxing in the Nook. If you've enjoyed this, please do click the like button down below. If you've got any feedback or comments, then I do take the time to read those, and I appreciate you adding those also. And if you want to be alerted to yet more unboxings in the Nook, then please hit that subscribe button, and what you'll get is basically an alert as to another video of me here in the Reading Nook with a box, a book, and me just chatting away for 10 minutes about whatever I've pulled out the box, and of course a nice hot cup of tea. Thanks again for watching, and I'll be back again very soon with another unboxing in the Nook. Bye for now.